flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, has council had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes from July 21st and the budget workshop on July 22nd? If so, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Any additional items for this evening's agenda? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion of the approved agenda. Motion to approve the set agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Motion from Robin, second from Rick. Those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Guest and open forum. Anyone here for the guest and open forum portion of our evening? Nope. All right, we'll go on to committee reports then. Personnel Committee.
Personnel, we met on the 23rd. We just kind of basically went through some COVID-19 plan updates. We updated our employee recognition policy, and I mean, that's about it. Yeah.
How about Park and Rec?
I guess that's me. We met on the 27th. We talked about the dog park, the changes for Carly Johnson Park equipment, and possible basketball court at Colbinger. I think Josh will be presenting all of that tonight.
Perfect. How about Planning Commission?
Planning Commission, a lot of stuff that we're familiar with. We had a public hearing on the pool code edits, so that should be coming. And then we also had just discussion, no action on the Prairie Village the parkland subject. So we talked about that, Prairie Village Homes. Talked a little bit more about the Chapter 9 and 11 edits that we're going to talk later about in a little bit. And we also had some discussion on the language about home occupation.
Wow. Golf Committee.
Golf Committee, we went over the financials year to date. Even with the restaurant being handicapped, we still are doing very well. We're going to be real close to a break-even point cash flow. We talked about the CUP for next year and some of the items that we want to work on. You going to present something tonight? No, okay. We're going to work more on it before we come with anything. Did I miss anything? Wait,
Wasn't there,
did I miss
Becky?
anything?
We
know
talked
we
about
all
the
look
hunting,
alike.
the goose hunt.
All right, Joint Planning Board, we talked about a township boundary line adjustment and a parcel adjustment. And that was the conclusion of our evening over there as well. So, any other committee reports that we've missed? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to our public hearing portion. Public hearing for City Code Chapters 9 and 11 revisions. Ms. Flipson.
Mary is also going to help with this one.
All right.
Get this straight.
And Ms. Rowe.
All right, so tonight before you is two different chapters. So the first one is Chapter 9. This one's actually a very short edit. Basically, it's taking it out of Chapter 9, moving it into Chapter 11. And then it's a much lengthier Chapter 11 discussion. So to start off with those Chapter 9 changes, this is the only piece here on kind of the bottom of the screen, really as it relates to where vehicles need to be set back or parked on your property. So that was taken, like I said, out of Chapter 9 and is proposed to be within Chapter 11. So moving on to the Chapter 11 pieces, there's a lot that's wrapped up into this one. So we do have a couple different categories within the proposed changes tonight. So we do have some permitted driveway or kind of accessory driveway materials that would be allowed, what it means for residential parking, where they can be parked, RV storage in their parking, and then we have some minor clarification on a couple industrial park pieces.
All right, so we're going to start with our edit to impervious surfaces. It previously included buildings, driveways, parking areas, sidewalks, patios, covered decks, retaining walls, things like that. We added the Class 5 crushed stone, crushed gravel, interlocking concrete pavement. These are surfaces that we are proposing for driveways, parking pads, things like that. We'll go into a bit further, but we did add this to the impervious surface definition in order to consider these towards lot coverage. We don't want someone having entire parking lots on their property, but we do want to kind of have that balance. So we are considering them impervious surfaces as they will be proposed to be designed. These are the surfaces that are proposed for residential driveway surfaces, concrete, asphalt, and interlocking concrete pavement. So the primary residential driveway is typically what you think of going into your garage. We do have figures that will go into that kind of show different scenarios of, well, if I have an attached garage, detached garage, if I have a no garage, we have defined those as well. So these are the three surfaces that will be allowed in that primary manner of, this is your main garage, the one that is primary to your property there. These are the surfaces that are proposed to be allowed for other driveways surfaces. So if you have a wedge off your primary driveway that leads to a side parking pad on the side of your garage, these are the surface types that we're proposing. That wedge can be, the parking pad can be anything, any parking pad on the side of your house, in the rear of your house. We've proposed to allow the limestone, the crushed stone, gravel, the interlocking concrete pavements, as well as the concrete and asphalt. So these are some of the figures that we've created to kind of show the separation and what would be expected of the surfacing between the primary residential driveway and then something different, something that's not primary residential driveway. So that, like I was describing, that wedge and parking that's separate from that primary garage. So we've got, these examples include if you have a sidewalk, detached and attached garages. It also includes the apron here. Is the cursor up? Yeah, okay.
If we look on here, this is that primary, so it'll be the kind of dirt or gray. That wedge that Mary had mentioned would be kind of anything off to the side. We just show an accessory structure on here for an example. The difference between these two exhibits is just it's an attached garage or a detached garage. So this is showing the house off to the side. And then this is just showing a sidewalk.
And then we do have the apron note there that aprons must be installed to applicable city standard plates.
And that
Which-
part's not new. That's been a standard for numerous years.
Yep, so this is just an example of some of the standard plates. They're a bit hard to read on there because they are quite detailed. The engineering comes in, it says, you can have your tapers at this degree and coming straight down to the right-of-way. This is all work within the right-of-way. So these are in existence, they're outside the scope of the driveway portion that we're looking at today, but we did want to show that example because that is a piece that exists, obviously, at the end of everybody's driveway. That's how you get onto the street. But that's what a standard plate would look like, separate from these driveway standards. And then we've created this, well, what if I don't have a sidewalk or a trail or anything like that? So There are definitions that where your driveway comes straight down to the street without the tapers, detached and attached again. So just kind of showing the surfacing. So they're very similar, just no sidewalk here. And then this is a legally non-conforming residence without a garage. It is requiring that a surface be paved up to the front of the face of the house. The accessory structure on here could, like Marie mentioned, could just be a small garden shed or anything like that. If you wanted to pave an area to that garden shed for, your riding lawnmower or something like that, you could definitely do that. But the goal is to have a primary residential driveway paved up to that face of that house. And this also shows sidewalk and then no sidewalk as well, so.
All right, so this next slide shows some of the issues that we have been working through, not only with community development, but Public Works was also involved with this. So this is showing some of the expanded driveways that have been built in the city of Becker. So this one here, it's actually paved all the way out to the road. So this one would have required that right-of-way permit, just because you are within that city right-of-way area. And then this one, from what we can tell, is also paved up almost to the property line. So with the proposal that we have tonight, there is a setback from that property line. We aren't wanting to direct any drainage onto neighboring lots, and then we're also not wanting to collect all that drainage from that parcel and bringing it to the street. We know that causes issues with our storm drains, especially if there's any dirt or anything like that in there. It can clog those storm drains and cause flooding. And one piece that's also noted on here is meeting parking setbacks or parking on the street. So if you start thinking cul-de-sacs, when you get wider driveways and someone wants to have a grad party or have friends over, pretty soon if you get wider driveways, that cul-de-sac pretty much has no on-street parking after multiple houses do it. So that's one thing we were trying to keep into consideration with this as well. As it relates to the surfacing in general, there are some pieces that we were trying to take into account. One of the main reasons too would be just environmental concerns. So if you have any vehicle that starts leaking, anything like that, the standards that we've described in the city code would help prevent some of that from getting into our groundwater and would protect it from that standpoint. Some of it would also be dust, any of the weeds, kind of like you can see here, it's kind of getting overgrown, so we do have language in here regarding weeds. This one is relating back to that impervious surface, kind of lot coverage. This is actually a city street right here, so that's kind of, you can't park at all along there. It's basically a driveway for, I'm not sure how many feet, it's quite lengthy. And this is just an example of more of a township standard or a township road standard. We do have some of the criteria in here that would help eliminate some of these drainage issues where it wouldn't cause some of this erosion. So that is part of what we have also taken into account. One of the other issues that's popped up, and this one has actually been in city code for a while. This is one of the pieces that we've moved from chapter 11, or from chapter 9 to chapter 11, is the setback from the right-of-way or from the sidewalks to allow pedestrian or traffic on it. So this is an example. Recently, the RV was parked over into the right-of-way, so they did throw a little hazard sign on there for people to not bump their head or anything. So this was not legal before this, and so that's one piece that is being carried forward from chapter 9.
And we actually added a little bit to make this especially clear that the setback from the sidewalk does also apply to anything vertically. So not just setback, across the plane, it also goes up. So because you're overhanging, we added a little bit of language just to make that clear that no, overhanging also not allowed.
So part of the discussion with Planning Commission and City Council has been, for creating these standards, how do we know that they are indeed in place? We already do have some different administrative zoning permits that we have through the city. So if you have a fence that's being built or some of those smaller sheds, we do allow, it's not a building permit, it's just administrative. So it's reviewed internally to look at what is being done on the property. So it was proposed that be the same process here. So we have noted the different times when that zoning permit would be required. So basically, if you're expanding, surfacing, or resurfacing any of those driveways or paving areas, it would require that permit to ensure you're not exceeding any lot coverage if you're installing it the correct way, and then to make sure you're meeting those setbacks and everything like that. And then this is, again, just renoting the types that would be allowed. And we do note that it would have to be, if it's a parking area, you do have to pave or make an impervious surface throughout that whole parking pad. So this is an example of a ribbon strip. You can't just pour 2 paths where the wheels go. It does have to be complete underneath the vehicle. Turn it back to Mary.
So these would be parking regulations for R1 and our large lot. Vehicles parked or stored in the side or rear yards shall be on an improved surface, and we list the options there. It's the concrete, asphalt, the crushed stone and gravel, interlocking pavers, class 5 limestone. So, and those should be installed according to the standards that we have proposed, but essentially, just don't park it on the grass. There are standards that are proposed, and it's these specific types in order to properly park or store a vehicle. The required front setback shall not contain any obstructions which may cause danger or traffic. This is specifically for corner lots. We have a sightline triangle here. This is currently in code in another chapter, and we're reiterating it here. It was mentioned briefly, but we did want to add a diagram because it's hard to explain a lot of times. But this sightline triangle is if you're on that corner, if you're driving that corner, if you're walking that corner, you need that vision to see safely across the way. Oncoming traffic or a person coming across the way. So it's measured 20 feet back from that corner is that sightline triangle. And then our last one is that surfaces utilized for parking shall be set back a minimum of 4 feet from side and rear property lines, and that the aprons and driveways shall meet the residential driveway standards set forth by the city engineer, so the 4-foot setback that was in our chapter that's in our chapter currently. There's typically a utility easement that you would need to stay out of, anyways. So we're reiterating that. The driveways and aprons as set forth by the city engineer, that kind of comes into play because there's allowance for tapers. The kind of flags that come off, your apron curves a little bit. There are allowances for that, and there can be allowance for that to go into that 4-foot setback as approved by the design under those standard plates. So we just wanted to make that clear. These are parking regulations for the other zoning districts. These are parking spaces as required by our parking chart, essentially. So if you have this size building, you need X amount of spaces, or if you have this many employees, you need X amount of spaces. That's our chart that we didn't adjust. But the parking spaces required by that park shall be surfaced in concrete or asphalt, except in pub or Q-pub districts, in which it should be surfaced in concrete, asphalt, or other materials as approved by the zoning administrator. So that gives some allowance for the parks to have some of the gravel parking lots and things like that. The additional parking spaces beyond what's required in that the chart, those can be surfaced with materials as approved by the zoning administrator. So if someone's doing if they're in iPark or iGen and they're doing some larger storing of vehicles or something like that, those can be on surfaces that's otherwise approved. And then
And then on that one too, I know recently we worked with some of the businesses If they can show proof of parking where they do have the spaces available to accommodate all of it, we have allowed for a lesser amount be paved. By code, they would need 20 stalls, but they're only going to have 5 employees up front. We have allowed that lesser amount be installed up front, but we can come back if they suddenly, hire on another 10 people. Generally, it's in a development agreement or on that building permit, where then later on they can go back and finish paving. So we do still allow for that proof of parking. That is still within code. It's just not noted within the changes.
Thank you. And then our last one is similar to what we have in R1 and RLL, is the 4 feet setback for parking areas from side and rear property lines. Again, that's going to be different if there's a utility easement or something like that, or landscaping required, things like that. But apron and driveways, driveway standards is set forth by city engineer. There's a lot of those zoning districts have, you can have a different project every time. And so that city engineer review is important there, as well as vehicles must be physically parked no closer than 5 feet from any building. We wouldn't want anybody parking right on top of that, but, a commercial building or anything like that, so. And then these are general parking regs for all of the districts. Any parking pad, parking lot, surface utilized for parking shall be graded to dispose of surface water, regularly cleaned and maintained, so just a general maintenance. All materials used in parking areas, driveways, parking pads shall fill in and encompass the entire area, so that's kind of where we were going with ribbon strips, but this is also just a blanket statement to kind of prevent any kind of patching, just, okay, I'm gonna pave just under the tires, or just a smaller pad than really my vehicle can fit or anything like that. Shall extend 2 feet beyond all edges of the vehicle to allow room for that, for any leakage or anything like that coming out the vehicle. And then we do actually state that all surfaces and materials utilized for parking and parking pads shall remain outside of those drainage and utility easements, except for pub, Q-Pub, iPark, IPG, and iGen are exempt from that requirement. Parking areas shall be weed-free at all times, and then nothing in this provision exempts the installation from obtaining any and all necessary permits as required by the city or the state of Minnesota. Particularly, we're thinking about right-of-way permits. So if you need a driveway zoning permit to resurface, or you're adding a parking pad or anything like that, but you're also resurfacing within that right-of-way, the apron portion of your driveway, you still need a right-of-way permit. That doesn't exempt you from getting that right-of-way permit, because Public Works still needs to inspect that portion of it because it's in that right-of-way space.
So moving on, in this sheet, or this language here, is actually one of the edits that council received tonight. So it's on page 18 of 40 at the top in the little lettering near the top. So this is one that we worked on actually with legal. So originally we had planned on language that had an end date. So originally it got pushed out till 2022. Legal recommended that we go with this language where once you're changing something, or if you're resurfacing, adding, expanding, at that time you need to come into compliance. So if you're throwing new gravel down or wanting to do anything at that point, you would still have to get that permit and come into compliance. So
no date?
So no date. Legal recommended removing the date and just do when you are surfacing and existing, or whenever you're going to need that permit. So that was the language here. And then, so that was it for the kind of general parking regulations. So now we're going into more of the storage and how that, it does relate to parking. This is more storage of RVs and the like. So right now, our current city code, and you can see it here kind of in this white box, for a recreational vehicle or RV, you have 30 days per calendar year, regardless on if you take it out, bring it back, you get 30 days on your property, and then it has to be removed. So with recent complaints that we've been processing, that's how kind of this one had sparked up conversation with Planning Commission. So that is where some of the recommendations are coming in tonight on kind of lessening those restrictions and allowing homeowners or property owners to be able to store one of their RVs or two of their RVs on their property year-round, as long as they're meeting the conditions here. So we do have a new definition section. I won't read through all of these. They are fairly lengthy, but an all-purpose vehicle. So you start talking about backhoes, bulldozers, dump trucks, all of the such. A fish house, we have kind of all of the names that are known along with fish house, the motorized golf cart, the recreational vehicle, so like your normal camper, RV, snowmobile, what a definition of stored is, which Mary will get into, the trailer, and then a watercraft. So those are brand new definitions.
All right, so, and then another one of our new definitions is an RV unit, and that's kind of how we approach this. An RV unit is any one of those previous definitions, so any one of those recreational vehicles / travel trailers, any trailer of any type, any one of those motorized golf carts, watercrafts, snowmobiles, any one of those previous definitions Marie went over, is considered one RV unit. The non-motorized watercraft under 10 feet, or less than 10 feet in length do not count as an RV unit, so that was like your kayak or, you know, the smaller rowboat or something that we were thinking of. Each property is proposed to be allowed a maximum of 2 RV units. Any one of those units stored outside of a structure counts towards that total of 2. Any one of those units stored inside of a structure does not count towards your total. If you have, so you could have a boat and an RV stored outside, and those would be your 2. You could also have a boat stored in your garage, and that would not count towards your 2. You could have 2 snowmobiles up on a trailer, that would count as 1, because that trailer is your 1 unit. And if it's stored outside, it counts towards that total of 2. So that's kind of how we broke it down, was the total of 2 stored outside counts towards your maximum of 2. And then we have stored versus moved. So it's stored if it has not moved for a period of 7 consecutive days. And then moved is the shifting or change in position at a distance of more than 1/2 mile. So that's kind of just helping us out, kind of defining what those mean.
Then we go into some of the general standards for all of these. So this is where it relates back to that parking code that we were looking at. So it's saying all of those vehicles must be parked or stored on those allowable parking services. So depending on where it would be located on your property, that's where it relates back to those exhibits that Mary had showed. This one also relates back to parking, keeping it free of weeds or that other vegetative growth. So it's keeping the driveways clean and clear of that. This one, it is also stating that the vehicles and equipment would be stored on a lot with a permanent dwelling or permitted accessory structure. So there are a couple parcels in the city where they have a legal kind of non-conforming accessory structure. You could still park your boat in front of it if it was legal back at that time. So that's what this is relating to. The vehicles, this is still current. This comes from old code as well. They still must be licensed and operable. Otherwise, if it's inoperable or unlicensed, that falls into a different category and would not be allowed. And then lastly, this is also kind of a copy and paste from the existing code that would be carried over. You are still allowed to have an RV. This is where that 30-day comes from, but you could use it if you have family coming over, you have a grad party, and you want to throw the camper out there. It still can be used or occupied by a guest or visitor. It still is a maximum of the 30 days per calendar year. And then it just has to have the self-contained facilities, the sanitary facilities.
Can you go back a couple pages? We had the magic number of 2. It was an RV. Yep, I thought we settled on 3.
Through Planning Commission, it was settled on 2. Yep.
Okay.
Let's see.
And then Just another point of clarification. The 30 days is only for if it's not on an impervious surface, right?
No, that would be if it's being lived in, or,
Lived in,
yeah. So
okay.
you could still use it as like an RV or a camper, you can have people in there. You just can't live in it year-round, it wouldn't be an actual dwelling or anything like that.
Gotcha.
So we do allow a time frame for that.
Okay.
Yep. So this is relating back to what Mary had mentioned, the all-purpose vehicles, watercraft, snowmobiles, if they're kept on that trailer, that is one unit. If being stored outside, yep, and a lot of this is redundant from that one before. So then we move on to kind of the next portion of this code update, and so that is the accessory structures. So not only is where you can park it, then it's what can be parked, and what if I want to store it inside? So what is the building that it can go into? So some parcels, if they don't have a garage or they need additional garage space or want it, we identify what materials can be used for those accessory structures. So I know this came up at Planning Commission multiple times. We do have the shipping or storage containers on here. This one's been in code for, I want to say, probably 3 years or so. It's just clarifying some of that on here. Specifically, if you're moving, you can still have that 60 days. And then if it is in relation to an open building permit where you need, some storage space for whatever's in the garage or whatever, we do still allow for that on here. We do have it specifically listed on tarp sheds, so like the blue tarps or anything like that. Those would not be permissible within the residential districts. Otherwise, it breaks it down between half acre and more than a half acre if the structure, if the accessory structure needs to look like the building itself for the primary building. Otherwise, we do loosen it up a little bit too. We do say the prefabricated molded plastic storage, so most common at like Menards or something like that. I know some people already have fences built, they don't want to bring in something and build it, so you can still piece it together, and we have allowed for that to be included within that accessory structure definition. Otherwise, the last ones that we cleaned up, and this is the last piece, within chapter 11, so we did clarify, so right now with our zoning map and our zoning code, there's a conflicting, we mentioned an area that's not existent, so we are removing that R3/office, and we are changing it to the commercial R2. And then the iPark facades, there was an editing error in one of the last updates, so we are including that 30% of the building face on that facade needs to have that decorative rock or brick, whatever it is, that they choose to go with. That's listed in our design standards, so it's clarifying that one. And then the iPark in the industrial park, that height clarification, it also had an editing error. There is a conflicting between 50 and 80 feet. So it does clarify that at 80 feet. Otherwise, with that, you can open
Okay.
public hearing too.
Does council have any questions for Marie before we go to the public hearing? If not, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at 5:33 PM. And if we have anybody for the public hearing, you can come up to the podium. You can remove your mask to speak, and then if you'll just state your name, your first and last name, and go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Pete Wiseman. And question on some of the parking regulations. Do we have anything in the books that specifies how many cars somebody can have in their driveway?
So the only thing that's in code would be if it's licensed or operable, anything like that. So if you have 5 licensed operable vehicles in your driveway, there's no.
They just need to be within 4 feet of the sidewalk?
Yes, within those setbacks.
Great. And then what about cars parked on the street in front of somebody else's house? Or, I would assume that, is there something in there that they have to be parked in front of the residence they're intended to?
Front, maybe you want that one. Generally, if they're on the street, it's a permitted parking, but there is a time frame, I believe, that we have.
I thought there was something in there that said that, the outside of your house was intended for people that were coming to visit your house.
As a common courtesy, yes, but there's nothing in it that would say that they can't park down the street if they wanted to.
Got it. Thank you.
But 72 hours is the max that they, regardless of where they park. On the street. Yep.
No more than 6
half mile, or a quarter mile, whatever it is.
That is for jumping out there and putting another quarter in the slot. Yeah, absolutely.
Next, or anyone else? Well, staff, that means you presented it very well, so thank you. Just,
Mayor, one last question.
absolutely, Pete.
Last one. Enforcement. Is this something that is anything that extra and above and beyond is gonna be looked at on a daily basis, or are we still gonna rely on people having to call in and make trouble on the website? You know what I mean? It is something, you know, I'm sure a lot of people don't wanna be that person, but, at the same time, the rules are there for a reason, so, yeah, what do we do on enforcement on this stuff?
So right now, we are a complaint-based process. So right now, there is an option on our website. You can fill out the complaint form and submit it to City Hall staff here. It does actually get routed through PD back to the correct department. So it is right now a complaint-based process. If there's anything we see that's, very unsafe, somebody's blocking, the sidewalk or something like that, PD has generally ticketed in that instance. But if it's something, parked back on a property or something like that, it hasn't been complaint-based.
And you may remain anonymous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the effective date of all of this, you had mentioned earlier, immediately, like when, if they do an improvement to their home?
Right, so if they, anyone that's wanting to, go build, as soon as this is approved, go build a new parking pad or anything like that, would need to meet these requirements. If there's a legally non-conforming driveway at that point, so if somebody had gravel down now, whenever they wanted to go re-gravel or expand or do anything with it, then at that time, they would have to come into compliance. So that would be for the parking, or the parking driveway specifically, or parking pad and driveway.
So if there's an existing one now, you don't have to do anything until you want to approve it.
Until you go to improve it or make changes. Yeah.
If you have nothing now,
If you have nothing now, if you're wanting to park or do anything like that, you would still have to meet it.
you'd have to
Yeah.
put the driveway in.
Yeah, yeah. So that is still a requirement.
All right. Last call for anyone. No? Council, any last? Planning, thank you for, you have spent many meetings covering every single line of this since February? January, February, so thank you for detailed work.
Yeah, we would have, we were gonna have this prior to COVID, but, so we're gonna talk, we had 2 planning commission public hearings. Went through it multiple 3-hour meetings, of just going through it and just saying, why do we, of everything that was proposed. It was, when we talk about, like the rock going down to the street, for instance, why do we need that? And it's like, okay, well, Public Works in that case, that when it goes, when the rock goes all the way to the street, it gets into the storm sewer. Okay, that's, and so we kind of went through and, we questioned everything. And so, and we even went back here this last time and took another look at a few things and adjusted a few more. So it's been heavily scrutinized, I guess. I would be curious if I could, if council, I'm sure everybody's been contacted in the last couple of weeks here, if everybody be okay giving kind of a synopsis of just what, what you've heard from feedback, I guess?
Sure, yeah, I'll start. I got just a handful of people that had called asking. It was more educational, like, what are you doing? What, I see this being posted anywhere. And just giving them the quick, what we're doing. And then they were fine with it, provided the data for them to look at, and most were okay with it. Yeah. I had one lady that called me back and was like, I so approve this. Like, you have to, do you want me to come to tell you I approve? And I'm like, I'll just take that back, thanks, though. So, I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, same kind of thing, like if people already had stuff down, they wanted to know if it was okay. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Robin, nothing? Mike, anything for you?
Nope, I've been involved in it since day one.
Yeah. Rick, did you get a lot of people asking?
I've had several.
I've had probably the full gamut. I've had people who have said, I think every piece of everything should be taken out. You know, if you can afford an RV, you should be able to afford to store it. I've had people who say, don't touch my property, regardless of, you know, I should be able to put 10 RV, or, you know, example, but exaggeration. But the one thing which I have had several requests, and I did ask staff this afternoon, and that was we get into the specifics as far as the class 5. We get very specific as far as, you know, that this is how it needs to be constructed. And I know when we talked about it at Planning Commission, you know, I don't work in that field, so, you know, when I see, you know, I don't think anybody works in the field, so I mean, we see that, we have to say, okay, that's, you know, what's suggested. I did have one individual contact me who brought out 2 contractors to hit. He was already trying to get the jump start, and he says, I'm gonna bring a couple contractors out and get bids so I can get into compliance. And he said he had both of his contractors looked at the specs for not the tar and the concrete part, but the class 5 part, and they both thought it was overkill. Like we were building a road, not a parking pad. And so, being that I've had several, I reached out to staff this afternoon and asked, how did we come up with that specific language? Unfortunately, the staff member that did that is on PTO, so I know we had tried, it was very last minute, and so I think if...
Yep, so we were able to have a chat with Jacob, who had come up with those standards, and so he had come across a lot of sources, so he had done a lot of his research, and he had kind of said, well, you know, sorry, it does sound silly to say it was a lot of sources, but he did a lot of the research and kind of found the overlaps of where everyone was saying, this is the way the standard is, and these are the best ways to install it, and the compaction. We did also reach out to, I believe we had Phil reach out to one of the contractors in the community who did it, who took a look at that as well. And we didn't receive that type of feedback. So again, you know, different contractors. So those standards were chosen for the cleanliness, the dust. That dust is a big deal. You know, if you're in a city environment and you're allowing this class 5, for those specific pictures that we were showing of the pitting and the, you know, the spread and everything like that, you're gonna see a lot of that on some of the larger lot, you know, 5-acre township lots where, you know, somebody will get their buddy to come dump a gravel from, you know, somebody who has extra and everything like that, and I'm not, you know, definitely not saying that those 2 contractors were doing that, but there was a lot of consideration made to say, okay, well, cleanliness, dust, the drainage, the fact that we're considering them impervious surfaces, when there can be, you know, drainage going through them, there needs to be that kind of standard to build them up, to filter that, anything that might leak throughout, because we want to protect our groundwater in the city. So what we're doing in going with those standards that Jacob met time and time again through his research, is creating that city standard of, well, you're doing a class 5 parking pad or a crushed limestone, crushed gravel, but you're doing it on a city lot, you're doing it next to your neighbor, you know. So we do want to allow those things because they are more affordable, and it really is, it does seem like a lot, but it's going from these larger stones to the smaller stones, compacting each level as it goes. So yes, it is a bit different than coming out with one size of gravel, compacting it, saying see you later. But it does create this level of standard that we want here, or we're proposing here in the city, to not have this, you know, this country driveway or parking pad that kind of spreads and weeds out in the pitting especially. So that was kind of where we had that discussion for today.
Okay, thank you.
If there's nothing else, I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike to close the public hearing. Those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed, 5:45 PM. How does council wish to proceed?
My thought was, I'd like to table the vote until our next meeting. Definitely not do another public hearing, I mean, we've done 3 of them now, or 4, or whatever we've done. This is the first one at council, but, so I would like to table the vote until the next meeting, just in case there's any other folks that would reach out. I think this seems to have only, as a city, we put ads in the paper, Facebook, we've hit it quite hard. It doesn't really seem to have only picked up traction for the last 3-4 days, I'll say. I don't know if I don't think I had anybody talk to me before last week. And all of a sudden, it just seems like it's here. So I guess my suggestion would be that we table it to the next meeting, not do the public hearing. If somebody wanted to address during open forum, they could, but other than that, it would just come to a vote unless there was any suggested changes.
Well, we've made notice of this time and time again. I see no reason to postpone the vote on this, either approve it or not. I don't, there's been ample time and ample ads put in the paper. If they haven't responded by now. And the other thing is, currently, without this, nobody's compliant. Currently, you can't park your RV in your driveway currently. So this would make it compliant. So I think we should go forward with it.
I would agree with Mike. I feel like we've done ample. The lady that wanted to read it contacted me last week, so I think it just depends their interest level in what they have going on. And I think planning ahead too. A lot of people, if they're buying an RV, they'll plan ahead. Where am I going to store it? What do I need to do? And hopefully they've reviewed the code, but like Mike said, you're out of compliance by not doing it. So.
Yeah, that's going to create just as much issue as any changes we made, because without this, we're probably going to get complaints from people again, So I would say let's go ahead. I'll make a motion. We approve ordinance 220 second series and 221 second series.
So we'll do 220 second series first, Mike.
Yep, I make a motion. We approve ordinance 220 second series.
Motion from Mike, second from Becky. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
And I'll make a motion. We approve ordinance 221 second series.
Motion from Mike, second from Robin. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mike, will you please review making a motion for the summary series of publication, ordinance 220 second series, as well as 221?
I'll make that motion for 220 second publication for ordinance 220 second series.
I'll second.
Motion from Mike, second from Becky. Any discussion on the summary? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
I'll make a motion to publication of summary of ordinance 221 second series.
Second that. Motion from Mike, second from Robin. Any discussion on the summary series? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, board, committee, and consultant reports. City Code Chapter 11 revisions. Ms. Blitzen.
It is another Chapter 11, but it is different, I promise. So tonight before you would be specifically relating to the pool performance standards. So this was back in front of City Council back in almost actually a year ago exactly. Part of the discussion at that time was if we should allow a automatic pool cover in lieu of a fence option. Back at that time, the discussion and decision was not to allow for the pool cover in lieu of the fence. The way that ordinance was adopted though, however, did still include that language to allow for the pool cover in lieu of. The way Planning Commission and City Council had wanted it was that's fine if you have a pool cover, but you also need a fence. So tonight in front of you is ordinance 227, second series, that would clarify that language to go back to what the original intended code was supposed to say for that. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I would recommend a motion and second for that ordinance and the summary.
Make a motion, we approve ordinance 227, second series, pertaining to pool fencing and covering.
I'll second that.
Motion from Mike, second from Rick. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Oh, Mike, will you,
We need to,
we have to summarize it and.
we gotta
public-
do a summary publication for ordinance 227, second series. I make that motion.
Motion from Mike, second from Rick. Any discussion on the summary? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried. All right, Carl E. Johnson Park Playground Replacement. Mr. Kua.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening, I have a resolution for 2058 approving the playground replacement project at Carl E. Johnson Park. So Public Services staff, in conjunction with Parks and Recreation Commission, had identified Carl E. Johnson Park in need of new playground equipment. In the attached documents, you'll see, if you haven't been out to Carl E. Johnson off Riley recently, existing playground equipment, as well as quotes and some various attachments. So we had identified this as replacement through the 2020 Capital Improvement Plan for Parks and Recreation. If you recall, the Parks and Athletic Facilities Master Plan that was also developed and completed last year had also identified this park as having poor playground equipment, poor being their official rating of it. Investing in this particular park is impactful to our community, as this park resides in an area that's underserved in our Parks and Recreation Department. And it also is the most accessible park for the neighborhoods across the river, and are able to access that particular park quite easily through the County 24 trail improvement that was done a few years back. So it's a really great property to invest in because it serves a lot of households and accessing that group of residents across the river, as City Park and Pleasant Valley is a little bit further away for those individuals and those families. So the idea, as we were going through the planning, was to provide a unique play experience that was not found at any of our neighborhood parks. Staff engaged 4 companies under the challenge of providing the most play value and also unique play experience within the CIP $80,000 budget that we were working with. The groups that we had engaged in, Weber Recreation Design, which is a vendor for Miracle Playground Systems, Minnesota-Wisconsin Playground, which is Game Time, Flagship Recreation, which is Landscape Structures, and Northland Recreation, which is Little Tykes Commercial. So in reviewing those concepts, which we brought to Parks and Rec Commission this month, we've chosen, and that the commission has recommended the design of Weber Recreation Design as the best fit under those guidelines. The Parks and Rec Commission did recommend that we go this course of action with this vendor, and it would, the total quote, as you'd see, I think is $82,281. So the $80,000 would be funded out of the capital improvement at the budgeted amount, and the remaining $2,000 and change would come out of Parks operation. So I'd be happy to, there's the design concepts as well as the footprint included in your packet. There's some of the, when we talk about unique play experiences, so if we're going to the, I think it's the last page in there, it's got the full design colored in your packet. Some of the unique things that we don't have in our park system that were really cool, on the kind of left side of it is a glide along. So that's, you hop on it and it's a 60-foot zip line that kind of is like a swing. It's very cutting edge in Parks and Rec. You see some of the different communities and newer projects that are going, have incorporated those in. The spider net looking climber is the Aquarius model, and that's an 18-foot high kind of spider net climber. They have one in Otsego. It's a really popular piece of equipment. And then kind of going off that climber and net design, in the center you have a spinner that's the Cone Climber Plus, and that is the premier model of any of those type of spinners. And as somebody who has a 4 and a 6-year-old, it's hard to get the kids off of those. You'll see the swings on the top, so there's 2 bays of swings, 2 traditional seats. One is a tandem, so you can put an infant or a young kid and then have the adult facing them on the same swing. And then there's also an inclusive swing that kind of locks you in. Some standard playground equipment, and then a couple of standalone pieces, a surfboard and another spinner for kind of the 2 to 5. But it was a really fun design. It kind of met what we were looking for to just create that unique experience that really isn't like any of the other parks that you go to. So it's something we're really excited about. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. If not, we're just looking for a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2058.
Gosh, this looks great. What will the surface? Will it just be right on the grass, or will you have some sort of textured?
Yep, so it's the corrugated wood fiber materials that's pretty consistent amongst our parks. So they're improved wood chips. It's not, grinding up a stump and putting, the wood shavings in place, but it's a park-specific product that's consistent with the other playgrounds in our area.
Then we had talked about redeploying, the equipment there is really old, but we had talked about possibly redeploying that to
Snuffy's Landing.
Snuffy's Landing. Is that still?
Yeah, we're hopeful. We met with Al from the streets. He actually installed that equipment, which is a credit to Al and his service for the city of Becker. That he would be hopeful that we could reclaim a couple of pieces of equipment, specifically the swings and the spinner that are out there. He's thinking kind of the monkey bar complex with the amount of concrete when they're pulling that out. He thinks it might bend up some of the equipment, but certainly we are looking to redeploy as much of that out to Snuffy's if staff and Parks and Rec Commission find that as an appropriate step.
Do we know when this is slated for this year yet? Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep. We're hopeful for, should this get approved, we'll begin this week probably reclaiming some of that wood fiber from the existing playground and getting it ready. And I haven't gotten pinned down on an exact time, but he was thinking October this would be in the ground.
If there's no other questions, I make a motion, we approve Resolution 2058, purchasing equipment for the Carl E. Johnson Park.
Second.
Motion from Mike, second from Robin. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, Josh, more exciting stuff. Purchase of fencing at the new Becker Dog Park.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's kind of Parks and Recreation hour here at the meeting, but a very exciting project as well that has a lot of similarities with the Carl E. Johnson project, as it was also, the genesis was the Parks and Athletic Facilities Master Plan. What we're trying to do as a staff is we did this big community engaged study that took over the course of a year and a half, and we're trying to follow kind of a blueprint of what's important to the citizens of Becker that participated in it. And one of those in particular is a dog park. So staff and Parks and Recreation Commission had been working on plans for a new dog park. City Council had approved $25,000 to be placed into the 2020 Parks Capital Improvement Plan for this project. The first part of the project was to determine the best location for the Becker Dog Park. And we put a lot of thought into it. It was decided that the north area of the Becker City Park would be a great fit. There already exists a separate parking lot for dog park access, and it is not surrounded by dense housing. We had looked at Carly Johnson as a potential option for that. When you think about the residential adjacent properties, barking dogs into people's backyards didn't seem like an appropriate step. So we really like the location of it. The project would be comprised of off-leash fenced areas separated, separately designed for small dogs and large dogs. Each area would have dual gate entrances from the parking lot. The next stage and most costly part of the project is the fencing for the park. And that's the main topic for this resolution that's presented tonight. So staff has engaged 3 companies to provide quotes for the fencing. Those groups were Northland Fence, Bembooms Fence Incorporated, and Authority Fence and Deck. You can see in the RCA the associated amounts that were quoted from each group. Determining factors for selecting the fencing companies were cost, availability for install, and positive work history with the City of Becker. In weighing those factors, staff and Parks and Recreation Commission recommend engaging Bembooms Fence Incorporated for the Becker Dog Park. Should this resolution pass, the projected install would occur by mid-October, which in a normal year, we would hope to have Barktoberfest again out at City Park, and it would really align with that. So we're still hopeful that, should this resolution move forward, we'd get this in place for October and maybe have a nice launch out there outside at City Park. There's some various attachments. The quotes are obviously attached, as well as kind of an overhead of the City Park areas for the small and large areas. Project funding would be $21,290 would come from the $25,000 that's budgeted in the 2020 CIP for the dog park project. Be happy to answer any questions. At the end, looking for a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2050 for engaging Bembooms Fence Incorporated for the sourcing and installation of fencing for the new Becker Dog Park.
Because we have the double gate as part of the project, is there any type of electrical or mechanical preventing of both gates being open at the same time, or is it just the fact that we have 2 different doors you have to walk through, and hopefully people are smart enough to make sure they shut the door behind them?
Right, nothing electrical. The dual gates just has the benefit of one open gate or dislodged gate doesn't get the dog out into the public. It takes 2, so it's kind of a traditional safety measure for dog parks.
All right. We're making the city better at one step at a time tonight, so.
A lot of residents have asked for this.
Yes.
For a while.
Yes, this is a huge, yeah. So how does council wish to proceed?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 29 for the purchase of fencing at the new Becker Dog Park.
I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Good news from Josh today.
I know. Change order number 1 for the 2020 street improvement projects. Mr. Knutson, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Loud and clear.
All right, perfect. In front of you tonight, we've got a change order for our 2020 street improvement project. This was discussed at Public Works. It entails 2 components, one at City Park and one at the street project on Parkview. When we bid the projects, or whether we put out for bid, we did not have soil borings done. We waited until we did soil borings for our well study for the well number 7. And after getting those borings, we found that the subsurface at City Park is a little less than we thought it was. There's more clay there. Traditionally, Becker's built on sand. And with the clay being there, the compaction just wasn't what we needed it to be. So after meeting with SEH and doing a site visit, we come to the conclusion that adding a little bit more base and another inch of bituminous would be the best remedy to keep the slope and elevation of the parking lot intact and to keep the drainage running towards the park. With that, there is an increase because of the cost. The net was about $21,000 for that project. On Parkview, conversely, we had better soils than anticipated, which resulted in the contractor being able to reclaim different than they thought they would. They've been able to grind it up and reuse it, gaining the compaction needed to make that a light 9-ton road. So because of that, there was cost savings there. So the net effect of this is resulting in an overall increase to the project of $7,456.90. With this increase, it still brings our overall project in under budget, which was set at $499,174.44. So we are moving forward with these. It was decided at Public Works. I believe an email was sent out to full council. So we were waiting on the official change orders, but quality was something we didn't want to sacrifice. And we're hoping that parking lot and street to get us to that 25+ year use or effective life after this project is complete. So if there are no questions, motion and second to approve change order number 1 for the 2020 streets project would be appreciated.
Ding. All right, how does council wish to proceed on the change order?
I'll make a motion to approve change order number 1 for the 2020 street improvement project.
I'll second that.
Motion from Becky, second from Mike. Any other discussion on it? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, carried. Change order number 1 for the Frontage Road Energy Drive project. Mr. Knutson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, in front of you, we've got change order number 1 for the Frontage Road project. Pretty good considering it's a close to $6 million project and we just got our first change order. So we're feeling pretty good about that. The change order does encompass several items on here. A lot of these have been reviewed via email. Some of them, if you recall, just recently, MPCA was out doing a stormwater test and inspections on the project. Standard protocol, the inspection went pretty well, but there were a few things that we needed to amend, and all of those have been remedied and taken care of, and some of them are called out here. There's a few things that staff looked to change. One of them was the lift station and the control systems out there. We increased the concrete pad size and fence size, so you could actually open the gates to the control panel and the generator while standing inside the fence. Thought it should have been caught, but it wasn't, so we increased that. We also changed the turning radius on County Road 8. It was very, very narrow, so shout out to Al Foss from our streets department on that one. He caught that, and we actually widened it about 9 feet, so a little bit of cost up front here, but it's going to give us a solid life on that street. A few other things that we needed to do, we had to put erosion control silt fencing around the stockpile material that is located. It's our material, but it's resides on XL's property, and as part of the MPCA controls, we had to put silt fencing around both of those piles, which is now complete. And along with that, at the onset of the project last fall, there was some uncertainty on the XL property as to if they had a purchase agreement in place or not, or what their boundaries were going to be. So because of that, there was nothing dedicated for their air quality fencing. A barbed wire fence marks their air quality permit area. So because we took it down for construction purposes, we needed to reconstruct it. In essence, we went from the northwest corner of the Northern Meadows fence, brought it down to Energy Drive and back up County Road 8 to reconnect it with our existing fence. So that was probably the biggest line item driver. All total, the total change order amount is $47,107.24. And currently our budget, we are about $200,000 under budget with the project just about wrapped up. So we're sitting very favorably in this project as well. So we do have this for your consideration tonight.
Any questions for Phil? No?
I'll make a motion to approve change order number 1 for the frontage road NG Drive project.
Motion from Rick, second from Robin. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
Thank you.
Administrator and staff reports. Grant writing services for the remainder of 2020 and 2021. Mr. Knudsen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In front of you tonight for consideration is a grant writing agreement that we're trying to get together with HKGI. They've done our master plan for our parks and recreational study, and they also assist public entities like ours in the grant writing process. It's very tedious. They put a lot of time into tracking what's available. We got the lead from the county. They do a good work with Sherburne County. And so staff decided to pursue it a little bit further. It doesn't just involve our park and rec. It can involve any city infrastructure. So they're constantly scouring to see what's out there for whether they're state grants or private grants or whatever we can do. So what we're asking for is to put an agreement in place, not to spend any money tonight, so to say. If there's a grant that they find lines up with a project that we've got slated, they would put a proposal together for us as to what that cost would be, what the total grant could be, and then we would present that typically at board level, and then pending their recommendation or approval, it would come back to council. The dollar amount of $15,000 is just kind of an anticipated amount. Assuming we showed them just from a recreation standpoint what our top 10 project list is, and they just felt that number, we're not obligating ourselves to that number tonight. It's just putting it out there to say that's what the city could spend the remainder of this year and into next year. On a typical basis, grants anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000. Run them, they bill us based on staff time, and it's roughly $2,500, $3,500 for each session. So in comparison, the county, I reached out to Gina Hugo, who's their parks director, and the county over the last couple of years has received $81 in grant funding for every dollar that they spend, and HKGI is the driving force behind that. So the return on investment is very great, and we feel very strong as a staff that we would be willing to sacrifice a few dollars out of our capital improvement to try and capture a few more of these dollars with that kind of rate of return. Even if we invested $2,500 and got $5,000 in a grant, it doesn't seem like a lot, but you're doubling your money. So that's the thought behind this. We're just trying to find any possible way to stretch our dollars, and we feel this is a great opportunity and wanted to get it in front of you for consideration. So again, if you approve this tonight, you're just allowing us to sign an agreement, and any dollars that would be spent would go through proper committee, then back to you for final approval before the dollars are actually spent.
I think it's a great idea.
Hey, Phil, this is Rick. So I guess whenever we talk, whether it's, we've talked to that budget a couple times before, whenever the grants come up, I ask the same questions and I'll ask them here, or maybe make the same requests. So as these, with grants, there's always strings attached. Usually groups have sometimes maybe different motives for why they're giving money away, and they will oftentimes incorporate those into the strings that are attached to accepting a grant. So my request would be that as you bring these forward to council, that you would that it be very clear what the strings are. What are the conditions of the grant? If we accept it, what actions do we have to take? That be pretty clearly spelled out. I don't think anybody wants to be in a situation where we accept something and all of a sudden, here we're having to now do something that we weren't planning to do, and it's kind of a surprise. We don't want to have that happen. So I would just ask that as you bring those forward, that those be pretty clearly spelled out. And then also just, okay, so you talked about for funding, obviously we would like to think that, we're gonna see the same results as the county, of whether it's 81-1 or whatever the ratio turns out to be. But the fact is, we may not get every grant we try for. At some point, we may be in the hole here, I guess. Is CIP where you plan to account for that, should that happen, or if you can talk to that?
Yes, to your first point, Rick, I completely understand. We don't want to commit the city to something that's going to hamstring us down the road. So we would be very cognizant of that and respectful of that as well. As it pertains to the CIP, yes, we would look to do that. We're trying to do this on a very limited basis to see what success we would have, again, to try and push that ROI. We may get a grant right off the bat, say there's right now there's a public health an activity grant through a private foundation that if you guys approve this, we're going to look into that a little bit more, and if we feel it's there, we could get that. It could be upwards of $40,000 to use in our parks for the purpose of creating healthy activities for school-age kids. So that would be the string to that. And if we did that, that money would come out of our park CIP, trying to enhance our parks.
Any other questions for Phil? How does council wish to proceed?
I would make a motion to enter into a grant writing agreement with HKGI.
Second that.
Motion from Robin, second from Mike. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Consent agenda. Mr. Brzezinski.
Madam Mayor, City Council, please take note. The consent agenda for August 5th is revised. Item number 1, hiring and termination reports for the Becker Community Center and Pebble Creek Golf Club. Item number 2, personnel policy update, employee recognition, that has been endorsed by our personnel committee. Partial pay request number 1 for Aztec Corporation, and that's the 2020 street improvement projects. Construction contract amount, $475,404.23. This pay request in the amount of $37,021.46, leaving a construction contract amount of $438,382.77. Item number 4 is a partial pay request number 7, and that is to R.L. Larson, and that's for the 2019 Business Park expansion, Frontage Road, also known as Energy Drive. That construction contract amount, $5,784,233.81. This pay request in the amount of $196,685.65, leaving a contract amount of $399,656.43. And then item number 5 is the addition, and that is a partial pay request for North Central on the 2019 Street and Trail project. Remember that contract amount, $1,008,793.66. This partial pay request is $91,659.24, leaving a construction contract amount of $250,732.41. If you have questions, I would be happy to try to address those questions. Otherwise, a motion to adopt the consent agenda for August 5th, 2020 would be appreciated.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor may state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Payment of the bills.
Pay the bills.
I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor may state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Anniversary announcements for the month of August. Josh Kua is celebrating his 2nd year with us.
Already? Wow, time goes by fast when you're having fun.
In the police department, Officer Trevor Wolseth will be celebrating his 3 years with us. And in Public Works, Mark Walters will be celebrating 16 years with us. So congratulations to those folks. Does council have anything else for the betterment of Becker? If not, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion from Rick, second from Robin to adjourn. Those in favor may state aye. Aye. We are adjourned, 6:20 PM. Whew. Am I talking loud enough or like, okay.
I'm
I feel muffled and you're like, oh, it's not hearing.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I don't care if it's Rona oxygen, I don't
Yeah.
see that.
I was like, I